So when you go onto Aave or you go into Compound, or in our case, you go onto Orca or Radium or whatever, and you stake capital in those protocols, you're putting it into one of their smart contracts that they've developed. Those smart contracts have been written by developers that have been audited by firms, and they should be perfectly safe. However, there are unknown unknowns, and what we don't know is how hackers will potentially attack these smart contracts in the future and drain them of all the capital that is held within them. As soon as it's outside your wallet, it's in somebody else's, and that is a risk. These unknown unknowns are really what we cover against. That's what you're looking to get with smart contract risk.
Welcome to the Deus Ex Down podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Aperture, and today on another Deus Ex Down podcast, I have Rupert, who is the project lead or CEO at Amulet, with me. I met Rupert at Solana Breakpoint in Lisbon last year, 2022, and I thought I wanted to hear his thoughts about the Solana ecosystem, but also on Amulet itself. So, hey Rupert, could you give a small introduction of yourself and what you do in crypto?
Sure thing, dude. Thank you. Well, first off, thanks very much for having me and the protocol on the podcast. We're big fans, and looking forward to hearing this one come out. I probably won't listen to it, but certainly the rest of the Amu Nation will. Like you said, I'm project lead over at Amulet. Amulet's a DeFi cover protocol. Essentially, we're there to protect assets inside the Web3 ecosystem, starting with Solana, but we're a multi-chain solution, so we are building out on alternative chains in the future, and we protect in a number of different ways. Right now, we're looking at smart contract risk, which is our main and actually only product that we have at the moment. We've got tons of other ones in the pipeline, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later. And essentially, there are a number of different risks inside crypto in general, and principally revolves around stealing, fraud, loss, price movements, all sorts of different areas. And we look to cover everything in the future in a bigger way as we can, and we do it with the innovative technology that we've built in house.
That's a really good summary, and we'll dig deeper later in this podcast. But before we do, I would love to hear your opinion on the state of Solana after the FTX collapse. Solana lost an important backer. Of course, there are still a lot of coins being held by FTX or the United States, but it left an impact not only on price but also on the developers. Although I've seen at Breakpoint that the development community in Solana is a very strong community. What's the sentiment in that community, and what's your perspective on the state of the Solana ecosystem?
It's really interesting, actually. So let me roll back a little bit and say some of the reasons why we decided to build out on Solana first rather than anywhere else. One was because it was proof of stake already, and the merge hadn't happened at that stage. So we were looking for somewhere where there was proof of stake and validators and nodes that we could generate a yield off, because that's kind of core to our system, which we'll touch on later. But two is it was incredibly fast, and it still is an incredibly fast network, and it still does exactly what Solana is built to do. It transacts very quickly at a very, very low price, and when Toli and Raj built the product, they built it for the financial world. So with DeFi, it made total sense. Now we've seen Solana be picked up a lot with NFTs, especially in the big NFT boom that happened in 22, 21 into 22. But it is still from a technical standpoint, it's exactly the same, right? It's the flaws that everybody talks about, they've been working on, and they are far less common now. The transactional rate is there. The transactions that happen on it every single day are much higher than all the other chains. In fact, I think it's something like 5x higher at the moment than other ecosystems. So all of that bit is all still there. Now, the other thing that we always have to consider with inside crypto is price action and really FUD, right? So since day one, since we came out the gate and said, hey, we're building out on Solana, we were either called fanboys, we were called, just following the herd. We were, cash grabbers. Every kind of word you could think of was fired at us, and that FUD is still there around Solana. It never went away, and it's just amplified, and it's more of a bit of a "I told you so" as opposed to I think really looking at what's happening, which is either the stats of network usage, and B, looking at the amount of development that's happening. So if you look at the amount of GitHub repos that are being deployed and drawn and forked, and there is a huge amount of action that's happening in Rust, that's happening on Solana, and that sort of stuff is often hidden by what is down to a price. Now, price is important, but don't get me wrong. There comes a point, and I actually don't have the answer to this, so just in case you were going to ask it, where the price gets so low that you cannot make any money out of running a validator. People go away from the network. It suddenly becomes ultimately centralized to a few computers, to a few validators and nodes around the world, and then the blockchain falls over. That is a real risk that can happen, but we are a very, very long way away. And what I've been so surprised about through this period is that, yes, price dropped off a cliff. It dropped off a cliff for everybody. Yes, TVL dropped much, much heavier and higher in the Solana ecosystem, DeFi ecosystem, than the rest. But the price is pretty well held. It held at around the $14 mark, $13, $14 mark. It dropped down a little bit to 9, and then it came right back up again. And over the weekend, where there was a 14% unlock of all Solana tokens, when you would expect the price to be dumped at that point, it didn't. It went back up, and now it's holding at 16. So it is from a developer standpoint, the tech's there, the community's there, everybody's still building, and that's what I find exciting about it. I find it curious about the price, but I'm not a trader, so I can't really kind of comment too much about that. But there's one core thing that's different about Solana and the ecosystem about Solana that I know about versus Ethereum and the other ecosystems out there, and that is how organized we are as a community. So what it's probably not obvious is that the Solana DeFi community have our own Telegram channels. We talk consistently. If I want to talk to Radium, it's just one message away. It's literally, they're right there. I can always talk to them anytime. And same with Mango, same with Orca, any of the major protocols within inside Solana. That, whilst that has a centralized element to it, is incredibly useful for building businesses and incredibly useful for sorting out problems very, very quickly. So when there is a problem with wallets, Phantom and Soulflare talk to each other like this. There is not trying to work out how to get hold of them. There's trying to work out who doxed people, undoxed people are, etc. It is just there, and that is one of the beauty, of the way that the Solana ecosystem has been constructed, because foundation, the labs, the ventures side of things have all come from this very San Francisco centralized attitude, and they're doing these big deals with big partners like Facebook and Google and Twitter and Stripe and all the rest of them. They are in that community and they've structured themselves in that way. So our little DeFi community has also structured themselves in that way to also emulate and make things better and faster and work better together. A very long answer to the question, forgive me, but hopefully it's struck a few chords.
Yeah, but it makes absolute sense. As we know in crypto, network is important, whether it's a digital network or a personal network. That's where value comes from. So if that network is equally strong as before an FTX collapse, or equally strong since when you started building, the value is still there. The only problem I see is, as you said, like DVL has gone away. Do you have a solution for that, like to get DVL back, get users back that you've lost? Or maybe the users are still there, but they just got wrecked on their holdings. That could also be the case.
Yeah, and wrecked is kind of subjective because obviously one soul still equals one soul, right? And so wrecked is if we're referring back to a dollar price, that's if you've still got 1,000 soul, you've still got 1,000 soul. But it's just worth a lot less. Now that's been across the board, everybody in the last year. I mean, look, we had Luna and then we had FTX. It was a shit show last year. There's no kind of two ways around it. My personal opinion on this is trust. We have to build trust in the network. We have to show that the developers and the builders are here to build on what is a very strong and a very capable network. And whilst we show that we're building on it in a strong and capable way, we've got to put in various layers of security, various layers of safety. Now, again, I'm slightly biased on this because I run a cover protocol, and yes, we are the only ones operating on Solana, and yes, we want to try and capture as much of that industry as possible. But beyond my own bias, I do think it's incredibly important to fill the gaps and fill the holes. A few years ago, before smart contracts existed, nobody realized that there is a risk of hacking smart contracts. Everybody realized cyber risk, right? Cyber risk has been an insurance product for a very long time, and hackers can hack the healthcare services in countries and ransom them, and that was very commonplace. And insurance companies came up with these elaborate insurance products in order to cover those sorts of risks. Smart contract risk is something that's very new. There are multiple other types of risks out there. I mean, me personally, I've had all of my NFTs stolen through fraud. Right, I was one of those guys that fell for a very well put together website that was targeted very much at me because I was part of two very good groups that were due to make a collaboration together. I expected this collaboration on the day that it was supposed to happen. I went to the wrong website and boom, I lost everything. And so there are these holes that didn't exist a few years ago. So we've got to plug those holes. We've got to plug these risks. And once we plug those holes, that's when institutional cash starts taking some bigger steps. And when institutional cash comes in, that's when retail follows. And so it's not an easy path, but it's a step-by-step process of build, safety, institutional, retail. That's my kind of way through this in order to grow TVL back up. And as TVL grows, of course, that also provides a little bit more trust to people. It shouldn't, frankly. It is totally broken in the way that we view a protocol. Oh, it's got loads of TVL, must be safe. But it's very easy to go onto a web page and put $10 million TVL and not actually check it on the blockchain. And people have been known to do that. So, look, the point is, just because there's a lot of money in a project doesn't mean it's necessarily safe. But if we go the right process of building these layers of safety, layers of protection into the network, then we can attract that capital in, which will then promote more.
Yes, and I think this is a good approach to restoring the trust of the users. And it also brings us, I think, to Amulet and what you're doing at Amulet. Restoring TVL is a problem in DeFi. And right now, the first product you put out with Amulet is providing a protection for the risk of decentralization, which is often in the smart contract.
Yeah.
Could you tell how a user could protect themselves with it, with Amulet, for those risks?
Yeah, and it's very simple. And we're also, to be clear, we're not the only ones doing smart contract risk out there. There's other amazing companies such as Insurace, who are in the same arena. This was already kind of kicked off by the grandfathers of our space, albeit they're only about 4 years old themselves. Nexus Mutual, who started off the kind of insurance revolution with inside DeFi, and we've got a huge opportunity to grow. But let's look at DeFi and let's look at smart contract risk to start with. So smart contract risk is essentially as it sounds. It's the risk that is based around the smart contract, and it's the smart contract is where you lock your capital into. So when you go onto Aave, or you go into Compound, or in our case, you go onto Orca or Radium or whatever, and you stake capital in those protocols, you're putting it into one of their smart contracts that they've developed. Those smart contracts have been written by developers that have been audited by firms, and they should be perfectly safe. However, there are unknown unknowns, and what we don't know is how hackers will potentially attack these smart contracts in the future and drain them of all the capital that is held within them. As soon as it's outside your wallet, it's in somebody else's, and that is a risk. These unknown unknowns are really what we cover against. That's what you're looking to get with smart contract risk, and you are looking to protect against the opportunity of somebody coming in and hacking one of these smart contracts and draining everything that's inside it. Now, the way in which you cover yourself, or at least with Amulet, is you come to the protocol, you choose the protocol that you want to cover against. So let's, for example, you click on Orca, you put in how much you want to cover, let's say $10,000. You put in the duration that you want to cover it for. So from today for the next 3 months. And then that will give you a premium fee. You pay that premium fee and you are covered. That is all that you need to do. It is entirely non-custodial. It's in it's all written into the smart contract, and you are covered for that period of time. Now, if there is a hack on Orca, and it is a proven smart contract hack, and there's lots of different types of hacks out there, and so it's very key to read our documentation and see what we cover, because you can't cover the entire world, but we do try and cover as much as we can. And you go onto to our platform again. You submit your claim, which really is about submitting that, yes, I had this amount staked in Orca. You can see my transaction detail here that it was staked. I had my contract. I did, because we're talking from the same wallet. Can I get a payout? Over the course of, I think our typical payout times of smart contract risk is around 2 weeks. We process the claim, and then we pay out the claim in the currency as described on the protocol, straight into the wallet, and away you go. So one of the things that we're doing here within DeFi insurance is speeding up the whole process. A typical insurance company would take months for them to investigate all of this. We don't. We take days, and where possible, we're instant. And we can talk again more about those in the future.
Awesome. That's a big improvement by at least cutting away some middleman. But I feel there might still be some human factor in here, in that somebody has to judge, like, was this smart contract platform really being hacked, and under what conditions is this payout? Could you tell about that process, how the judging of the hack goes, or the validity of the claim?
Yeah, 100%. And you're right. This is it's a huge area, and it's something that actually in DeFi insurance we get quite a lot of flack for, because they're saying, "Oh, you're just a traditional insurance company. Insurance companies are built to not pay out," and that's not the case. Yeah, we're very happy. We want to keep both sides of the platform happy: the people who stake in to underwrite the policies, and the people who get paid out. And we've got a unique system of how we're designed that helps that, which I'll touch on next. But first off, let's look at the claims process. Let's talk about how that gets assessed. So, exploit happens. That exploit is immediately seen by our team because we're monitoring all of our protocols anyway. So within 6 hours, just because of time zone differences, etc., we commit to saying that we're going to see an exploit happen. And we start to investigate what happens. At that point, the base level of funds get locked on our protocol. So let's say we have exposure of $10,000 worth of policies on Orca that are live. At the time of the hack, we lock $10,000 of our treasury that cannot be removed, so that until the discovery is done, that capital is there in order to make the payouts. We start our discovery phase. Typically, that takes around 3 days. It's us talking to the protocol, looking at the chain, and essentially auditing what happened in this potential hack. And first off, we assess it, and we make our comment and recommendation to our community. So we either agree that it's a smart contract risk exploit and it should be paid out, or we disagree with that, 1 or 0, right? Our community then starts to assess it, and they either agree or disagree with that. And then if there is a imbalance of decision, we bring in a third-party DAO to make the final decision for us. And that is the kind of core to this, is that the third party that we bring in is impartial to both sides. They don't have any exposure to either product, and they're built in a way to act as judge and jury on the evidence provided by both sides. If they agree that it pays out, it should be paid out. If they disagree that it pays out, it won't. And that's the final decision in the process. So we try and make it as impartial as possible. But right now, we are required that, there's a very new industry. It's very nascent. You need human eyes to look at it. And inevitably, those human eyes do have some levels of bias in there. But this is the least bias we can apply to a system. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I always say about bias, well, it's just a preference that's in the judgment. So even if you put it in code, there is a bias in the code, and that's made by humans. So whether
Correct.
you have a group of humans judging it or you write it up in code, there is always some bias. It's like some people say, like, if you write it up, if it's by machines, there isn't any bias. Now, that's not true. So it makes sense, and especially about very complex problems, and especially about parameters you haven't looked into yet, because I think that's one of the cases with these hacks is, if you have a hack, it's probably on an attack factor you haven't really thought about yet, or like the project hasn't thought about that. So it's also hard to secure, or you as Amulet build metrics for. So you need to judge, like, what metric is this, or what really happened. And of course, you'll write smart contracts. You maybe pull data from the blockchain. That's undisputable. But how to interpret that data, I think that's a human factor, and very hard to automate in these cases. So makes sense, and especially that you try to, in a way, decentralize that with a community that's responsible for judging this too. And if you disagree as parties, you can bring in another community. How do you incentivize the community to get on board with this process and start judging the hack themselves?
That's a very good question, actually. So we've got about 80,000 users in our community, and it's been growing massively. And they're all part of our Ammu Nation, and they help us do a number of different things. But essentially, to do actions with it, if you do an action within inside the community, you are rewarded through NFTs, through points, and in the future you'll be rewarded through tokens as well. Although we haven't launched our AMT token just yet, it is coming at the right time. So every action is rewarded throughout the community, and we have a hugely dedicated community. And I'm just going to shout out to the Ammu Nation while we're here, because you're so important to everything that we do at the business. It's in fact they are the business. So every action is incentivized inside the community. That it's not to say that the community are biased then in order to be able to say, oh, we must pay out, we must not pay out on this. We try and keep that element, balanced as much as possible. And at the end of the day, if Amulet doesn't exist because we're seen to be biased and we never pay out on claims, and there is no trust that we operate properly as a cover provider, then we are in there is no future, and there is no rewards for them. So it is in their best interest to act as impartial as possible. And at the end of the day, we are in a cover protocol. It's not exactly like we're the most exciting thing. We've got a certain type of community member that like to follow us. So that's how we do community. But before we go too much further, I wanted to touch on one critical thing that makes Amulet very, very different to all of the other DeFi cover providers out there. And that is really core to our structure. And if you remember right at the top, I talked about Solana and proof of stake and how that was ultra necessary to what we build. And this enables us to have less of a concern about doing payouts in the way that we're structured. So the key thing to remember about with Amulet is that when you stake into the protocol, you're risking your yield and not your principal. You stake $100, it's everything that you make on top of the $100 that is risked, and not the $100 itself. Now, the reason why that's really important is because the majority of the other ones, in fact, all the other ones, it's everything, right? It's $100 plus your yield. You're risking that against the potential of a claim on the other side. Now, the way that we have designed the protocol is you stake into a Solana proof of stake validator. That generates a yield, and it's the yield from that we can use to pay out our claims. And so that is really very different to how everything else operates. And it means that we as a protocol don't have the concern as much to say, hey, we can pay this out, because we're not taking all of our stake as cash. They know that they are majority protected, and it is that top layer of yield. And the way in which our metrics are designed is for us to be able to have a certain amount of payouts expected. There is, if we are advertising that we're generating, I don't know, 14-20% yield on our staking pool, which is very achievable as an example. We are not advertising 14-20% sort of pre payout. We've expected that actually our yield's going to be much higher than this, and the payouts are going to come out from that bit on top of that. So we've taken as many steps as we can to be able to pay out on these claims without having bias to one side or the other from our point of view, and educate our community in the same way.
I think that's one of the features of Amulet that made me interested and actually ask you on this podcast, because I love the idea that you are securing the blockchain itself by letting the user stake their soul. But also by doing that, they provide security for the ecosystem on top of that. So there isn't any risk of yield that's from the ecosystem itself. you could use one smart contract platform to secure the other, but then you just double down on risk. But here you use that base layer as absolute security, and then provide security to the projects on top of that. So I think that's a very win-win for the ecosystem. And one question that comes to mind, and even though you're focused on Rust ecosystems, is that with Ethereum moving into the Shanghai update, would something like this be possible too on Ethereum or other EVM chains?
The short answer is yes. So, we will be on EVM chains in the future. I don't know what that future and timeline looks like, but we will definitely be on EVM chains. The reason why we are a multi-chain approach is we just don't believe in a single chain strategy. We kind of look at chains like cloud service providers. AWS, biggest cloud service provider out there. They own about 33% of the market. But you still got Google Cloud, you still got Microsoft Azure, you still got Rackspace, you still got X, Y, and Z. There are hundreds of cloud service providers out there, but there are some clear winners. And so we obviously want to be on the clear winners. And we do believe that Solana and the way it's structured is a potential clear winner. Obviously, when they were building AWS, they didn't have the same crypto markets to contend with, but it's a slightly different world for us. And so look, we're in the distinct belief that this will be a multi-chain future, but products will have to be slightly different depending on how those chains are built. I don't know enough about the Shanghai update to be able to say whether or not it's going to work in the identical fashion. But what I do know about our own roadmap and our own capabilities and what we're going to grow into is we will be multi-chain. We will be probably the largest insurance or cover provider in the industry, and that's entirely what we're here built to do. We're here to take over that corner of the market and start protecting it from this point. It is frankly, it is great that there is a bear market, because there is less of an area to cover for us and allows us to grow with it, as opposed to trying to get our way in at the peak.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to start, develop your product on a chain that you trust and know well, get a community around you, and finally, when you have that fit, start going to another chain. Otherwise, you'll just be spread thin in your development, and especially business development, because I think that business development is super important for a protocol like Amulet.
You're entirely correct. Yeah. Actually, just to touch on that one, the way I've been looking at potentially structuring is you have to have a separate business development team for each chain that you operate on, because each chain has its own nuances. They have their own ecosystem, and yes, there are crossovers, but you really do need to be embedded in the Avalanche system, or in the Elrond system, or in the ETH system, or BSC, whatever it is. You need to be embedded in those communities in order to gain the credibility and the trust from the protocols.
Yeah, good point. I think I would like to see how you could further expand your features or product suite on Solana. We've talked about the smart contract risk, but there are many risks in the crypto ecosystem, and one of them is like the DPEG risks of stablecoins.
Yeah.
It's not a feature that's live yet, but I know you're developing that. Could you, expand a little bit on what the risks there are with a stablecoin depegging, and how users could potentially protect themselves from that?
Absolutely. Look, in my opinion, stablecoin DPEG cover is an absolute necessity in the industry. It is the biggest risk that we have in the industry. It's the biggest risk to me personally. I get paid in USDC or USDT, depending on what we're working with. and so my income and the livelihood of my household and my children and all the rest of it is tied back to a token that is supposed to be backed by the US dollar. And it is a big worry to me that if that depegs, then it's not just our industry that goes. It is also, it hits much closer to home to me. So it's an absolute necessity for stablecoins to be insured, and actually probably insured at a base level. So how are we approaching it? Well, first off, we are working on a product at the moment that we hope to get out within the next couple of quarters. I haven't got an exact timeline on that. And it's an innovative approach to how cover products are done right now. And it puts a lot of the control of that product into the hands of the people that created the actual stablecoin themselves. So, for example, let's say I created stablecoin, Rucoin, and it's $1 to $1, but the dollars underneath it are backed by a whole basket of different things. This is similar to DAI, right? And I wanted to get more usage of my token. How would I incentivize users to show that, okay, if it was to depeg, I've got your back? Well, I would be able to create this product that Amulet are working on, and essentially back my own product with my own insurance product, and secure a different currency into this smart contract that then users can buy policies against, to know that they are actually getting a product. If this particular stablecoin went down, this product is there to protect and pay out, and an instant payout, my add, if that stablecoin does depeg for the parameters that we've put into the to the depeg. And typically that looks like something like, if it depegs for continuously over or a rolling day average for 10 days, then payment out would happen. And that's a pretty common policy. We've seen that happen with Unslash. We saw that with Insurace when the UST depegged. Both of their policies were built on very similar principles, and that's what we want to do. But rather than utilizing the structure that we've built already, that works very well for smart contract risk on Solana, we want to trial this new way of doing it and see what the appetite is. There are similar products out there on the market, but the way in which we're approaching it is, again, unique. It should be super user friendly, and hopefully we'll solve a big problem around that. Now, that's just the product itself. The product's one thing. How do we get this out there into the market? That's the bigger thing, and that's where we want to be seeing this built into wallets. We want to be seeing this built into exchanges, so that it's provided at source. As soon as you convert into that stablecoin, it is covered, and that's the core of this. It's much broader, much further beyond any type of insurance product that we've seen so far. But we've got to start with small apples. We're going to start where we know we can gain traction, and that's the product that I kind of alluded to, described. I can't give too much away, but it's coming.
It's already a good insight into what you're doing, because it is different from what I've seen from these depeg protocols. Like some of them have a specific strike price, and then you put your ETH or whatever other token in the contract, and when it hits the strike price, you lose to the other side. So it's more of an options, or it feels like a really degen product where you just bet on the stablecoin not depegging or depegging. And there is just, some statistics from the last few months on how much it can depeg. So that's even something that is different from that protocol. They judge like how much it should depeg, and once a coin depegs, like the strike gets even wider, and it becomes another risk for the platform itself, because then you expose yourself a lot to oracle risk too, like an exploit. Just to exploit a single data point to push that strike price over and basically take the whole pool. So it's weird that if you are building a security platform, or actually an insurance platform, that you yourself are a very big risk, and having a rolling window, having maybe a community or some governance on top of that to judge that, removes that risk.
Correct.
So that's what I'm getting here from what you're telling me.
It's kind of an evolution away from I think I know the protocol you're referring back to there, and it's I really like what they've done in particular. In fact, we can talk about it. I think it's Y2K. I think, is that who you're referring to?
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. True. But there are some copycats, so we all take the same group.
But I really, I like what they've done there. I'm not a fan of the UX in the slightest, but in short, I do appreciate the approach they've taken to it. But that to me is not an insurance product. Like, that is a betting product, and there is elements to it that operates somewhat like an insurance product. There's huge amounts of risk with inside stablecoin depeg. They're huge, and I don't think it's the right place for a cover or an insurance protocol to be providing a straight buy this, get cover right now. I think those days have gone. I think they were opportunistic, and I think they were also hopeful that things like Luna wouldn't happen. But actually, it's happened to Luna. It's happened to a whole bunch of other things. I was in the days when it did happen to Tether. Like I saw Tether depeg and the whole market panic, and thankfully it repegged, but it repegged based on news articles and Twitter, and just saying, oh no, here's all the documentation that you need to show that it's actually all backed one to one. But it can be such a small thing that can send the market into panic. That I was of the opinion that Luna couldn't happen. UST couldn't happen, because Luna was so strong and it was so over collateralized. But I was entirely wrong, because they were able to short the hell out of it, create the market panic as intended, and break UST. The people that did that made a fortune. I would hope, if they were good people, they put some of that money back into the ecosystem of people who got damaged and hurt by that, because many people got hurt and lost all of their savings. I am also hopeful that having a protocol that says a 20% yield for your savings doesn't happen again. But Anchor, I believe, is still up and still reporting as such. I don't think it's a appropriate thing, but anyway, that is crypto in that respect. We will get better. It will end up being regulated, and it will be cleaner. Unfortunately, the yields will come down too, because with regulation comes tighter controls, which cost a lot more, which means there's a lot less yield. And this is exactly what happened to the banking industry, right? We will see a lot of that happening, and there'll still be the underlying layer of people who are still doing it illegally without the regulation, but you'll have all the same risks. So you can't have one without the other, unfortunately. It would be nice to have none of the risks and all of the yield. And I think there are efficiencies to be made within inside the overall system. So I've gone off slightly down a bit of a tangent here, but you can see what I'm saying. Like, there has to be trade-offs in order to get to the point I think we want ourselves to get to, which is control of our own capital in a safe environment where it's not entirely all on me to do your own research, so to speak. There's only so much research you can do. You don't know what the thoughts of the people behind this are, and as we've seen time and time again, there are so many different ways to exploit people of their cash, and people will always go for the easiest option.
It's always a delicate balance between risk and reward. I think one of my favorite sayings about the market is you get paid for the risks others don't want to take, but it also works the other way. So you take extra risk and you can lose more. And I think for real adoption, bigger parties to come in, they have less risk appetite than your average degen, which is much higher. So they are fine with lower yields as long as it's does have less risk. It's more predictable, which is also a factor. Like if it's unpredictable, there's probably more risk. So it's needed for that adoption, and there will still be coins that give those big yields. You always have to question what's the real yield, who's paying for that yield, and that's what we've seen in the last 2 years, that most of that yield is actually not yield. It's either other users paying for it or early users just receiving it because they're early. So it's logical that yield will come down. And then for other like risks we have, I think we've come to the part where you have to open your book. Like, what are all the other features you're building? What's coming? Like we want to know. Like, there are so many risks. You can do it short, but feel free to talk about all the products you are developing.
No, I will. Thanks. And so the two biggest requested products by our community are Stablecoin DPEG and NFT cover, and those are the two that we're working on hard to make sure that we cover off, along with making our multi-chain solution operational throughout 2023. So there are a few things that we're working on. We've only got a limited size team, and there's only so much we can do, but NFT risk, Stablecoin, DPEG, those are the two that are our primary focus to us. We're also looking at a wallet cover product. We've got some very interesting conversations going on with a few partners on that at the moment, and we'd love to be able to bring that to market in the very near future. And that is essentially to protect against what happened to Slope. If you remember further back in this year, the Slope attack drained something like 3 million wallets or something like that. I forget the number, but it was a lot, and so that can't happen, and we want to provide cover to everybody for that. That is not dissimilar to custodian risk, which is again another product that we've been working on for the right custodians out there. And beyond that, and what I see in the future, and where this is really something that was very key to the Solana choice, actually, is about kind of transactional speed. GameFi risk. So GameFi, I still believe, is our biggest opportunity over the next 5, 6, 7 years. And the reason why I look at that is I look at myself and I look at my kids. So myself, if I could have sat as a teenager playing GTA all day and got a decent wage, I probably never would have got a job. There was no reason for me to go out and do that. Now, of course, industry has moved on so much more since then. We've got leagues, we've got competitions, we've got streaming. All of those things didn't exist for me. But they're also not in my kind of wheelhouse. I'm an entrepreneur, right? So if I could have set up a shop inside GTA, and I could have sold products, and I could have converted the yield from that money back to real money, I probably would have done that. But it was whilst people are kind of doing that nowadays, it's still a bit obfuscated. It's not the priority of the system, and I think, dare I say, metaverse and GameFi kind of colliding and creating these worlds where people do want to spend a huge amount more time. There are going to be economic sides to that, and that's where GameFi is the big explosion is still yet to happen. And we're not talking about Axie and that kind of stuff over there. That is just people utilizing a game to generate a yield. This is a game finance economy. This is a whole new economic system that is being built. You've got TradFi, DeFi, GameFi, and that is the real excitement to me. In order for us to be able to be involved in that ecosystem, though, we have to operate at the speed at which those systems operate. So when you're buying weapons, when you're buying spacecraft, whatever it is, and they can be stolen, and they can be broken, and they can be hit, and these things have cost you real money, and there is real loss, that is where we come in. So you spent $5 on something, you want to cover that for $5. You tick the box saying I've got cover, and you pay the premium inside the game. That's GameFi is really where we need to be in the future, but we're not there just yet. The traction isn't there in that industry. Demand isn't there in that industry. There's still a huge amount of FUD from gaming world back towards crypto world, and there's a lot of hurdles to overcome. So when we get there, that's the big next thing.
Yeah, so it's further down the roadmap, but surely something you could take a look at. And for example, NFTs are already there, so it might be a smaller step working from an NFT
100%
cover product to GameFi. How would such an NFT cover product look like?
It's a very good question. So there's a number of ways. So there's a number of issues around NFTs in general. I mentioned at the top of the podcast I was defrauded of all of my NFTs, and that's a really common one, right? Where somebody gains access through, creating a fake mint page or whatever it is, and steals all your NFTs inside your wallet because you've the typical way is you have approved them to do so, to go into your wallet, do the transaction. You approved them to go in because you were so desperate to get this product or NFT drop or whatever it is. That's exactly what happened to me. And what the product we want to do is to try and stop that. So how do you try and stop that? It's probably, and it's not fully developed out yet, and it is a little bit late further down the road. It probably looks like a way of adding multi-sig to your chosen wallet, or adding a third-party verification service to say, look, just take a beat. Let's just have a look at what you're trying to do over here, and let us verify that this person is real and not not trying to steal things from you. So we're looking at higher value NFTs to start with because there's less transactions around that, and they are very, very valuable. And then we want to build out a product that actually does this all in real time, and it can be done very much quicker. So essentially, Amulet is the verifier for the seller to verify that the purchaser or the person you're interacting with is real.
Yeah, and that sounds logical because a lot of these hacks are mostly socially engineering hacks. So it's of presenting an interface, trying to hide some transaction data or the wallet you're transacting to. I'm going to shill our own podcast. We had a interview with Pocket Universe, who is trying to make transactions more readable for users. So it's an extension where you can check
Great
what the
idea.
transaction is. So those ideas, making transactions readable, verifying whether you're transacting with a real person or not a blacklisted wallet, features like that are needed to make basically not only the UX for NFT transactions, but the UX for crypto better. So I feel,
100%.
yeah.
I mean, I hate the fact how, yes, we've got block explorers, which are great. And I love, going down a rabbit hole of like, oh, where's this transaction gone? And but you can get lost extremely quickly. You can, and it's still extremely confusing because you've got umpteen different, the word has just escaped me, numeric numbers of like wallet addresses.
Hashes, wallets,
Hashes,
yeah.
there we go. Thank you. You got loads of different hashes. It's not just about the hash of where the wallet's gone from, the transaction's gone where, and two, it's also the transaction itself. It's also all of the information within inside that, everything's hashed. And so it's bloody confusing to look at this stuff and be able to track it. And so I think that's a hugely important thing. I think what we're doing to make that a bit easier. One of the things we haven't released that is coming out in the next quarter is our dashboard, right? So you can see how we're doing as a protocol and actually all the transactions on chain, because we look at all of our own transactions and all of the smart contracts that we've sold to create our metrics from. We provide that back to the community. In fact, one of the projects is doing it that extremely well right now. If you look at Insurace, look at the data page on their app, you can see each individual insurance product they sold. You can see on which network it is. You can see how much capital they've got backing all of that. And these are all key things. Like, taking a step back for the moment, in TradFi world, if we talk about TradFi insurance, you buy an insurance policy and you have to trust that they have got the money to pay out when when the worst happens. And people have found time and time again that actually doesn't happen. So Katrina is a great example of this. Tons of insurance companies went bust because they didn't have the money to pay out, and they were on the hook to these customers. And who got screwed in the end? It was people who lost their houses that found out they actually weren't insured. That is the people who really lost out in those scenarios. So we have to be better than that. So step one, we can only sell the insurance that we have cover for. How do we demonstrate that we show that we're doing that? It's all locked on the blockchain. Well, yes, it's all locked on the blockchain, but if you can't see it, how if you're not an expert in chain, like, how are you going to do this? So we've got to create a layer on top of that to make it viewable, make it easy to digest, make it easy to take in, to say, okay, I've got $100,000 policy with this company. They have $200,000 locked in their smart contract. I know I'm safe for the duration of my policy. It is there, and that is so important, so important. So looking at, forgive me, I can't remember the name of the firm you mentioned on the previous podcast, but them doing that for the rest of the blockchain and making the transactions easy to understand is an incredibly valuable tool.
Yeah, and this is also one of my personal interests. Like, we have a huge database, a public database called blockchain, and it has a lot of like raw data that's either not really easily readable or well aggregated. Also, the interpretation of that data is not always easy, and people can disagree on what's what. So I think we need abstractions, like data abstractions on top of that, where we can derive these insights easily from. And we can create dashboards, or we can create other tools to let the non-programmer or the non-data analyst look at this. And we're getting better at that. Of course, we have platforms like June or Flipside, but still there needs to be some code that's being written. So I think that's definitely something to watch for the next few years. And I think it's also something protocols, as you are doing right now, should do, like create these insights about what they're actually doing on chain, and where funds are going, and make it easily readable and insightful for their community or external validators of the platform. I think, that was what I wanted to ask you, but is there maybe some final feature you want to mention about Amulet, or do you have like a general message for the audience, the Ammu-Nation, or the Solana community that you want to share?
So I'm gonna go with the general message point of view, which is don't be afraid of Solana. Solana is a incredible network. It's got an incredible network of builders currently operating on it, and we are building for the for the future. Yeah, let's take token price out of it for the moment. Regardless, I think it's an incredible buy personally. That's not financial advice. It's my personal opinion on something, because I do think it has legs in the future. Look at the stuff that's being built. Look at the developers that are on the chain, and look at how they're put together. Look at how those businesses are operating and the sort of connections that they have. It is designed to be a very financially centric, financial first product. It will probably end up being a fairly boring ecosystem, but it is where the big companies of tomorrow are being built. And so if you want to be part of that evolution, you've got to be in part of the Solana ecosystem. And that's not just one big shill. Obviously, there are others out there. There's plenty of other stuff to operate on. Just use your noggin. Look at what's happening. Look at how they're developing, how we're developing. And it becomes pretty obvious, in my tiny opinion, for what it's worth. Feel free to message me on Twitter on how much you disapprove of my my message. But thank you very much to the Ammu-Nation. Thank you very much to the huge support of the Solana ecosystem. And come and support Amulet, stake in Amulet, and be part of our evolution too.
Awesome. And you mentioned that we can find you on Twitter. What's your tag on Twitter?
I'm MetaBear at Twitter, and being extremely difficult about that. I use, instead of A's, I use 4s. So MET4 BE4R.
We will drop a link in the description. If you end up on a Twitter page with a nice word art, MetaBear on top, that's the right one. And also visit amulet.org. Yeah, and make sure that you also check amulet.org or the documentation if you want to read more about the protocol. Thank you, Rupert, for coming on to our podcast. It was a delightful conversation. So thanks for giving us some insights into Solana.
Thank you very much. No, pleasure to be here, and I look forward to coming on and giving you guys an update in a 12 months' time, perhaps.
Great. We would love that. And for our listeners, make sure to like and subscribe to the Deus Ex DAO podcast so we can keep inviting all these great guests in the future. See you in the next podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Deus Ex DAO podcast, a place where some of the most progressive and innovative builders, thought leaders, and traders in the crypto space come together to discuss all areas of the crypto industry. Whether you're into DeFi, Layer 1s, Layer 2s, NFTs, or anything in between, we've got you covered. And as a reminder, nothing said on this podcast should be construed as financial advice or as a solicitation to buy or sell any digital asset or security. The comments, views, and opinions expressed by the hosts or guests on the podcast are their own. As always, you'll need to do your own research.